tenir cet après-midi par vidéoconférence le sommet de Zagreb avec les Western Balkans. We have had the occasion this afternoon to have the video conference with the Western Balkans partners. As you probably know, we intended to have this summit in Zagreb under the Croatian presidency, but because of the COVID-19, it was not possible. It was very important, 20 years after the first Zagreb summit, to have this video conference, to have this occasion in order to tackle very important challenges that we need to face together. And of course, the first important topic is the COVID-19, because it's important for the European member states, but also in partnership with the partners in the Western Balkan region to overcome this very difficult challenge. And that's why we have taken, as European Union, some very important decisions which shows our solidarity with this region. We provide 3.3 billion euros in assistance in the short term, in the mid-term for this region in order to support the recovery strategy in this region. It's also very important to repeat as European Union that it's essential for us to work in the framework of the G7, in the G20, I mean at the global level, because this crisis is global and it requires a global solution. That's why we consider that this international cooperation is so important. The second important topic that we have discussed during this summit this afternoon is the European perspective of the Western Balkans partners. It's a very important signal, it's a very important message that we have reaffirmed, that we have reconfirmed, and it was essential to give this strong position, to express this strong position. It means that it's important to continue the reforms, to implement the reforms, the rule of law, the democratic values, the fight against corruption. Those topics are essential for the benefit of the citizens, for the benefit of the people, but also in order to strengthen the partnerships between this region and the European Union. I would like also to use this occasion to welcome the decision that we have taken regarding the opening of the negotiations talk with North Macedonia and with Albania. Je voudrais aussi saisir cette occasion pour indiquer que durant cette rencontre par vidéoconférence, nous avons eu l'occasion de réaffirmer au plus haut niveau politique la perspective européenne pour cette région, et ça signifie que la poursuite des réformes, notamment en lien avec l'état de droit, en lien avec les valeurs démocratiques, la lutte contre la corruption, la lutte contre le crime organisé, doivent rester des priorités tout à fait essentielles. Nous avons eu l'occasion de le rappeler. Nous avons aussi salué les avancées qui ont été faites afin de réduire des tensions dans la région, notamment dans le cadre de l'accord Prespa entre la Macédoine du Nord et la Grèce, ou dans le cadre de l'accord d'amitié qui concerne la Macédoine du Nord et la Bulgarie. L'implémentation de ces accords est aussi un point important pour pouvoir continuer à mettre en place une dynamique positive et à pouvoir délivrer des résultats. Donc voilà les quelques éléments que je voulais partager avec nous. Une déclaration a été validée qui exprime cette ambition de rester très engagé sur le plan international et spécialement pour ce qui concerne la relation avec cette région dont la perspective, nous l'avons affirmé encore ce soir, est une perspective européenne.
Merci, Monsieur le Président du Conseil européen. I now give the floor to the President of the European Commission at the Commission building.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Andrei. Indeed, we've had very good discussions between the European Union and our Western Balkan partners. Discussions on our common challenges and how to take forward our cooperation. This summit, even if it's virtual, it's a testimony of the importance the European Union gives to the region. And it is a testimony that the Western Balkans are an absolute priority for the European Union and for my Commission. The Western Balkans belong in the EU, and there's no question for us about it. And this is why I firmly believe that the European Union has a special responsibility in assisting its partners in the region. This is particularly true regarding the impact of the coronavirus. And there were many strong signs of solidarity in difficult time going back and forth. I want to thank very much the countries in the region for their solidarity with the European Union. I recall that Albanian doctors went to help Italy, and Serbia and Montenegro helped enormously to fly back home EU citizens that were stranded. The donation of protective equipment, for example, made to Italy. On Monday, this is another sign, we had a global pledging conference. We collected globally $8 billion, and more than $4 billion came from the so-called Team Europe, and Serbia was part of that team by pledging too. I think that is a strong and very clear message. Likewise, the European Union has mobilized an unparalleled financial package, indeed the 3.3 billion euros. 750 million euros have been a macroeconomic financial assistance. So it has been designed to help the Western Balkans to address the immediate needs in the health sector, but also, of course, to take the first measures to mitigate the socio-economic impact and to inject liquidity to small and medium-sized companies in the Western region. This has been done together with the European Investment Bank. We have also associated our Western Balkan partners in the European Union initiatives that are normally only reserved for member states. For example, with the joint procurement initiative to buy medical supplies like masks and ventilators, but also in the concept of the so-called green lanes crossing the borders that helped enormously to have the flow of goods going. All this is a demonstration that the Western Balkans are our privileged partners, given our unequivocal commitment to their European perspective. Once we put behind us this immediate phase of the coronavirus crisis, the European Union will accompany the longer-term recovery with an economic and investment plan. I expect the plan to be presented later in the year because, of course, it's linked to our European budget. I can already tell you that the investment plan itself will focus on the necessary transport and energy infrastructure to interconnect our regions, but also in our main policies that are the European Green Deal or the digital transition, which will also be at the heart of the European Union's recovery. The regional cooperation and good neighbourhood relations are key for the economic recovery in the region. We know this too well in Europe, where our single market is our strength, and we want the Western Balkans also to get closer to the single market and benefit from it. For this, governments in the region will need to continue to deliver on reforms, particularly in the area of the rule of law and the fight against corruption, on the functioning of the democratic institutions and public administration. This means tackling corruption and organized crimes, where we want to see a clear track record established. Let me stress in particular that a free press is also a cornerstone of democracy and in the Europeans' DNA. We know if we want to fight disinformation, we need a strong and a free press. This is the best mean against disinformation. But it will also give the possibility to those countries that show faster, tangible results in reforms to move faster in the accession negotiations, opening more chapters in one go. This is the new methodology which we adopted earlier this year. I'm particularly happy that the summit takes place under Croatia Council presidency, our newest member in the European Union. It is in this Croatian presidency that the European Council decided to give the green light to open accession talks with North Macedonia and Albania, a strong sign. We have just celebrated a few days ago the biggest enlargement to the European Union 16 years ago. The enlargement policy, this is something where I'm deeply convinced, is one of the most successful EU policies. It has spread peace, security and prosperity across the continent, and I'm sure it will continue to be the benefit of the Western Balkans and the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Passing the floor now to Zagreb, to Prime Minister Plenković.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Ursula. It was really a privilege for Croatia to be a virtual host of the Zagreb summit, which was planned for many years. It was the FAR project and the centerpiece of our presidency of the Council. I was personally present back in Zagreb 2000 when the first type of this summit was held under the French presidency at the time. Since then, Croatia has passed really a long, demanding way towards the European Union, and we have used the enlargement process and the accession process as a true transformative exercise for our political, legal and economic system. We have been in the Union for 7 years. We are the youngest and the latest member of the Union, and therefore, being a country that understands very much what our first neighbours, countries of Western Balkans, countries of Southeast Europe, are seeking for, we wanted to organise this summit in order to send them a strong signal that the European Union is here standing by them and is willing to help them on their way to the European Union. As Ursula has said, the enlargement policy was one of the most successful policies throughout Europe's 70 years history. And our ambition was, during the Croatian presidency, which is being organised under the motto, a strong Europe in the world full of challenges. We didn't think when we drafted this text back in October 2019 that we were going to be faced with the COVID-19 pandemic, but still, we wanted to put among our priorities the dossier of enlargement, the Southeast European countries and the Western Balkans. I can proudly say that compared to the blocking of the decision to open the accession negotiations at the European Council in October 2019, in the meantime, we have managed, thanks to our joint efforts, to unblock this decision, and the European Council in March confirmed the decision to open the accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. In our view, as Croatia, these decisions were long overdue. Secondly, we have managed to adopt a new methodology of the accession negotiations, so the new enlargement methodology, which I think is essential at the outset of the work of the Ursula von der Leyen's Commission. And I think this will help not only Montenegro and Serbia, who are negotiating accession since 2012 and 2014, but also in the future, North Macedonia and Albania. We also wanted to send a signal to the furthering of the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo, because this will not only normalise their relations, but help them to send a positive signal to the stability of the region and to move to other priorities towards the European Union. In particular, Croatia accentuated the Bosnia and Herzegovina as our closest neighbour, country which in our view deserves the status of candidate country. We shall continue to support them in their reform process, but also on their way towards the European Union. In this context, we emphasise the issue of equality between the three constituent peoples in Bosnia and Herzegovina and others, and in particular the position of the Croat people and in terms of the legitimate representation in the Bosnia and Herzegovina highest institutions. I think that the assistance which the EU will offer in the fight against COVID-19 to the Western Balkan countries has been confirmed. that the next economic package that the European Commission will publish in order to support the Western Balkan countries is very much awaited, that the new multi-annual financial framework will take into account the needs for the economic recovery of our neighbouring countries and not only the EU member states, and that politically looking ahead with a lot of appreciation to Chancellor Merkel and her initiative of the Berlin process that has been sort of putting together the leaders, some of the leaders of the EU and leaders of the region since 2014. I think we should continue with a systematic holding of summits of this nature, at least every 2 years, in order to politically guide our relationship in the future. Even though our presidency, unfortunately, did not happen in the way we wanted, I mean physically, but in terms of substance, I think we delivered in respect to the expectations that we had and that our neighbouring countries had. So a big thanks to all of the leaders who participated, and I'm sure that the people and the nations in our neighbourhood will appreciate the message which was today sent virtually from Zagreb, but literally from every single European capital and the key European and financial institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. We have a lot of questions, also from regional media. Please identify yourself with name and medium before I pass the floor, and please state to whom you want to address the question to. We will start with Ernest Bunguri from Euronews, I believe. Ernest, are you there?
Thank you. Yes, I have one question for the presidency and one for the Commission. Prime Minister Plenković, you are heading the only country that 20 years ago was sitting on the other side of the table with a group of the Western Balkans, and today you are heading also the European Union. If you recall the statements of that time, declarations of Thessaloniki, how would you evaluate, have you achieved the messages of this Zagreb declaration to be weaker, equal or stronger than those 2 decades before? And President von der Leyen, I wanted to ask you, is this pandemic affecting somehow the timeline of the Commission in terms of the enlargement work or maybe some reforms in the countries? And what would you like to see happening during this year in 2020 in terms of concrete steps, let's say, for example, with North Macedonia, Albania, Montenegro? You can add other countries if you wish. Thank you.
Shall we answer immediately?
Yes, in that order, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for posing this question. Well, I not only was physically present back in 2000, I participated from Brussels' perspective to prepare the Thessaloniki summit. I was in Sofia, and here I'm again in the role together with Charles and Ursula as the co-organizer of this event. I think if we look at the nuances of the language in all of these documents, you can see the progress. And that's why I said in my opening statement that the summit in a way concludes the joint work that we did since October till today. I think the Zagreb Declaration is very solid, very substantive, sends a strong political support to all the countries in the region. The fact that we finally made a decision to open negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, and that we have the new methodology and the summit in the first 6 months of the mandate of Charles and Ursula, I don't think we could actually be asking for more. So from my perspective personally, I'm very pleased and happy that we managed to navigate through a lot of difficult political and diplomatic negotiations and achieve the document and the messages which we all heard during the last 3.5 hours.
Yes, to your question, the pandemic and concerning the timelines of the enlargement process, of course the pandemic is a huge challenge to the timelines of the enlargement process, but if we are smart and if we stand together, we might also use it as a push forward to grow closer together. Because what we all have in common now is that after the lockdown, we see a vast economic damage in all our economies, and we are heading towards a recovery program. And as the investment package of the European Union will also look at the recovery needs of the Western Balkans, and if we align, and that's the goal, our common policies of interconnectivity, our policies of digitalization, the policies of the European Green Deal, we can leap forward, we can bounce forward together in common strategies how to bring back the economies on our feet. And so far, right now it's a challenge, but I hope looking back one day we say we made the best out of it and we grew faster together.
Thank you. Passing the floor now to Bernd Riegert from Deutsche Welle, I believe. Bernd.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. I have two short questions, one for the Prime Minister and one for Mrs. von der Leyen. Mr. Plenković, should the countries in the Western Balkans be more grateful for the help that they get from the EU? Should the Serbian president, for example, kiss the European flag rather than the Chinese? And Mrs. von der Leyen, did you take the opportunity to talk about the European budget and the money and the recovery fund and all these helps that also have to be financed somehow for the Western Balkans?
Well, it is not up to me to talk in the name of any other leader that took part in today's meeting, especially coming from our neighboring countries. But what is certain and what we could all hear is a very clear and strong articulation of all the 6 countries in the Western Balkans that their objective is the European Union. This is their finalité politique in terms of orientation. And one thing is certain, this summit is helping them to go in the right direction. I think there is a lot of appreciation in all the capitals in the region for what the European Union is doing. These countries are in a way surrounded by the European Union. If we look at geography, there is nowhere else they can go. So from my point of view, this is something that you will have to ask personally, but I think there is an understanding and appreciation for what the European Union is doing in political, economic terms, and especially in terms of financing many projects in infrastructure, and also assisting in fighting COVID-19 pandemics.
So my answer can be very short. No, the European budget discussions were not part of the discussions of today. Today we had, Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, but approximately 35 participants in this summit, and rightly so, the whole focus and concentration was on the EU-Western Balkan relationship and, of course, the accession processes and growing closer together.
Okay. Passing the floor now to Tanya Milewska from MIA. Tanya?
Yes. Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I have a question for the three of you. I mean, today Freedom House published its report, and Serbia and Montenegro have been for the first time rated as hybrid regimes, meaning they are not entirely democratic. This means that the 2 countries that the European Union is negotiating with are now hybrid regimes. And this will lead me to a second question. Do you think that it's time to speed up the process with North Macedonia and Albania in order to have maybe more successful stories when it comes to negotiating enlargement? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. We had the occasion to repeat that the reforms are essential, and the fight against corruption, the rule of law, the democratic values, those issues are essential in a European perspective, and our message is very clear, and that's why it's so important to continue the implementation of the reforms. As European Union will be very committed in order to be certain that it's possible to make more progress on those topics.
Yes, indeed. The rule of law is the cornerstone of the European values, and it is conditio sine qua non for any kind of accession process. So these reforms have to be done, and the progress has to be shown. That is true for every country that wants to be a member state in the European Union. What the second part of your question is concerned, it's a process that is pretty complex. So there are many, many different topics that have to be discussed in the respective chapters. Therefore, just only speeding up because of the question to be fast is not the right way to go. But the new methodology opens the possibility to have in parallel a few chapters so that you can speed up the process. And I hope this will be possible with the new methodology now.
Just a quick addition. I think in terms of methodology of the accession negotiations, chapters 23 and 24, who are dealing with fundamental rights, who are dealing with issues such as freedom of press, with the fight against corruption, with the rule of law, with democratic standards, actually exist in order to be used as a leverage in speeding up the essential democratic reforms. And therefore, the process of negotiations, I insist, it's a transformative process. The more countries who are demandeurs of joining the European Union are engaged, the more reforms will be successful. Staying somewhere in the parking lot is not an incentive for strong reforms, even in this area. We have seen that elsewhere before.
Thank you. We're passing the floor now for two last questions, to Vince Chadwick. Vince, can you hear us?
Yes. Hi. Thanks.
Hi.
My question is for President Michel about the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which has invested 13 billion in the Western Balkans, but is also considering an expansion into sub-Saharan Africa. I'd like to ask whether you think that's a good idea or not, and what message that sends about the European perspective that we're talking about. More broadly, I'd like to ask when, if at all, you're planning to bring the question of the future of the EBRD and especially the EIB in Africa and also relatedly in Europe to head of state level, because as you would know from your previous role, this question has been discussed for a decade. And again, it's come forward, but again, officials say they have no clear idea what leaders want for the future of the EBRD and the EIB. Thanks.
No, thank you for this important question. And indeed, I think it is very important in the European perspective to be more active at the external level. It's what we are trying to do with this important summit that we had today. But I think indeed that it will be also important in the future to consider that the relationships between the European Union and the African continent will be essential for our common future. And I have the impression that in the framework of the next negotiations related to the next European budget, it will be essential also to identify which kind of strategy we would like to develop towards Africa. And in my personal opinion, I think indeed that it is important to invest more in Africa, in our common interest. It's important for Africa. It's also very important for Europe. And the question will be asked, what are the tools that we can use? The European Investment Bank, with his expertise, is a possible tool that we can use. But it will be important to have a very strong dialogue with the African partners in order to identify what's the best way of working, in order to be more efficient, in order also to be more visible as a European Union. And I don't forget that at the moment the European Union and the member states, we are the most important partner for the development in Africa.
Thank you. One more question. Going to Ivana Dragicevic. I hope I pronounce your name correctly.
Hello, yes. Hi from Zagreb. I'm Ivana Dragicevic from N1 Television. We're going live in several countries of the Western Balkans tonight. My question goes to Ms. von der Leyen and Mr. Michel. You've said that Western Balkans belongs into EU and enlargement is one of the most important policies of the UN. In the declaration, you say that EU is determined to further intensify its engagement at all levels, be it political, economic, or social transformation. So is there political will within the Council to understand that it is important for Western Balkans countries to be a part of Future of Europe conference? Thank you.
Thank you for this question, and my answer is very clear. Yes, there is a European perspective, there is a strong European perspective. And if you look at the situation, a few months ago, we were divided at the European level. It was very difficult to have the same position about the possibility to open the negotiations talk with Albania and with Northern Macedonia. And because of our political involvement, we have agreed a very strong position in March, a few months ago, and we have taken the decision to open the talks with North Macedonia and with Albania. And our message is very strong, is also very clear, and certainly after this COVID-19 crisis, it's essential to develop a very strong strategy with this region in order to invest in the short term, in the mid-term, in the long term, and in parallel, it's important for the region to reduce the tensions, to continue all the efforts in order to implement the reforms. But I repeat, at the highest European level, we share this opinion that there is a very strong European perspective, and I think that this summit today was the occasion.
Sorry, I'm talking about the Future of Europe conference, which is under the auspices of the new Commission and Vice President Šuica.
I didn't hear your question. Can you repeat your question?
I'm talking about importance of Western Balkans being a part of Future of Europe conference that is being held under the auspices of the Commission on the suggestions of several European countries, of which France is one of the most important. Thank you.
About the conference on the future of Europe, we are in discussion with the European Parliament in order to agree about the modalities, the concrete modalities. And of course, during this conference, it will be important to discuss all the possible topics. My opinion is certain it will be important to involve the European citizens, to work with the different European institutions, to involve the European citizens, and if it's possible, to develop also a kind of dialogue with other regions in the world, and especially with the Western Balkans. It's a topic that we will discuss with the other institutions.
Madam President.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, as the conference on the future of Europe will be a conference with the European people on how they see the future of the European Union, automatically there will be the topic of enlargement and how to integrate our Western Balkan friends. So it will be a module of the conference for the future of Europe.
Thank you to all participants. Thank you to the two presidents, and from Zagreb, of course, with the Prime Minister. Thank you and stay safe, and see you next time.